The gunshot echoed across the wide Montana sky as Willa Harper's fingers trembled on the trigger of her father's old Colt revolver. The dust-covered target fluttered in the wind, untouched by her bullet that had flown wild into the distance. Her frustration mounted with each failed attempt, much like the storm clouds gathering on the horizon over Elkhorn Valley in the summer of 1876. "Damn it all," she muttered, lowering the weapon. 3 months since her father's passing, and she was no closer to becoming the skilled shot she needed to be to protect the struggling Harper ranch. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like the merciless Montana sun. "Your stance is all wrong," a deep voice called out, startling her. Willa whirled around, raising the gun instinctively before recognizing the tall figure approaching on horseback. August "Gus" Blackwood, notorious throughout the territory as both a skilled gunman and the most infuriatingly handsome cowboy this side of the Mississippi. His reputation preceded him everywhere, fast with a gun, faster with the ladies, and the most capable ranch hand who never stayed in one place longer than a season. "I didn't ask for your opinion, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, tucking a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "Don't you have somewhere else to be?" August dismounted his chestnut stallion with fluid grace, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the sun-baked earth. The slight curl of his lips betrayed his amusement as dust rose around his worn leather boots. "Your father hired me before he passed, Miss Harper. I'm here to help run this ranch, whether you like it or not." He approached with confident strides, stopping a respectful distance away. "And right now, I'm thinking you could use some help with that shooting." Willa's pride stung. At 22, she'd been managing the ranch books for years, but the physical demands of ranch life were testing her limits. Still, she wasn't about to let this drifter see her weakness. "I'm doing just fine on my own," she insisted, despite the evidence to the contrary. The wind caught her skirt, whipping it around her ankles as she struggled to maintain her dignity. August's eyes, the color of a clear Montana sky, assessed the situation with one sweeping glance: the untouched target, her improper grip on the revolver, and the tension in her shoulders. "Your father was a good man who saved my life once," he said quietly. "I promised him I'd look after this place." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "And after you." "I don't need looking after," Willa snapped, even as exhaustion threatened to betray her. The ranch was drowning in debt, cattle rustlers were growing bolder by the day, and the neighboring Carson family was pressuring her to sell. August stepped forward, gently taking the revolver from her hands. "Everyone needs help sometimes, Miss Harper. Even stubborn women who think they can take on the whole territory single-handed." His calloused fingers brushed against hers, sending an unwelcome shiver up her arm. Willa pulled away quickly, unsettled by her reaction to this man she barely knew. "Show me then," she challenged, crossing her arms, "if you're such an expert." Without a word, August turned toward the target, adjusted his stance, and fired. The bullet hit dead center with a satisfying thwack. He handed the gun back to her, his expression neutral. "It's all about balance and breathing," he explained. "May I?" Willa hesitated before nodding reluctantly. August moved behind her, his chest nearly touching her back as he adjusted her arms. His breath was warm against her neck as he spoke softly. "Relax your shoulders. Feel the ground beneath your feet. The gun is an extension of your arm, not a separate thing." His nearness was disorienting, the scent of leather and sage enveloping her. Willa forced herself to concentrate on his instructions, ignoring the flutter in her stomach. "Now breathe in," he continued, "and as you exhale slowly, squeeze the trigger. Don't pull it." Following his guidance, Willa fired. The bullet clipped the edge of the target, not perfect, but far better than her previous attempts. A small thrill of accomplishment coursed through her. "Not bad," August acknowledged, stepping away. "With practice, you'll improve." "Why are you really here, Mr. Blackwood?" Willa asked abruptly, turning to face him. "My father's been gone 3 months. You could have moved on long ago." August's expression grew serious, the perpetual hint of amusement vanishing from his eyes. "Your father took a chance on me when nobody else would. I owe him." He glanced around at the sprawling landscape of the Harper Ranch, his gaze lingering on the weathered buildings in need of repair. "Besides, I've seen what Carson and his men are capable of. You shouldn't face them alone." Willa's defenses wavered. Richard Carson had been pressuring her to sell the ranch since the day after her father's funeral, his methods growing increasingly intimidating. "I can handle Richard Carson," she insisted, though the tremble in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. August regarded her for a long moment. "I don't doubt your courage, Miss Harper, but courage alone won't stop bullets or save your cattle." He gestured toward the distant herd. "You're down to what, 50 head? Last winter's losses and those recent thefts have hit you hard." His accurate assessment stung. The ranch had once boasted over 200 cattle, but disease, harsh weather, and increasing rustling had decimated their numbers. 63, she corrected defensively, "and I've got a plan to rebuild." "A plan that involves learning to shoot?" August asked, raising an eyebrow, among other things. Willa turned away, unwilling to reveal just how desperate her situation had become. The banknote was due in 3 months, and without a miracle, she would lose everything her family had built over 2 generations. August seemed to read her thoughts. "Your father mentioned the debt before he passed. He was worried." Willa's head snapped up. "He told you about our finances." "He was concerned about what might happen to you if—" August didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They both knew Jeremiah Harper had been dying, his heart weakening day by day. "Well, I'm handling it," Willa insisted, though in truth she was barely keeping her head above water. Every day brought new challenges: fence lines cut by Carson's men, threats to her ranch hands causing several to quit, and the looming banknote that seemed impossible to meet. "Let me help," August said simply. "Not just with shooting lessons. I've worked every job there is on a ranch. I can repair that broken windmill, help with the spring roundup, maybe even track down those rustlers." "Why would you do that? You're a drifter, Mr. Blackwood. Everyone knows you never stay anywhere long." Something flickered in August's eyes, regret, perhaps, or a sadness she couldn't quite place. "Maybe I'm tired of drifting." Willa studied him carefully. At 30, August Blackwood had the weathered look of a man who had seen too much too soon. Rumors about his past circulated through the territory: former lawman turned gunslinger, Union soldier who couldn't settle after the war, a man running from something or someone. But beneath his confident exterior, she glimpsed something genuine in his offer. "1 month," she said finally. "I'll give you 1 month to prove you're more than just talk. But I make the decisions around here, understood?" A slow smile spread across August's face, transforming his features. "Perfectly, Miss Harper." "Willa," she corrected. "If we're going to work together, you might as well use my name." "Willa," he repeated, the sound of her name in his deep voice causing that strange flutter in her stomach to return. "And you can call me August, or Gus if you prefer." "August," she said, testing the name. 1 month starting today." As they walked back toward the ranch house, the gathering storm clouds finally released their burden, fat raindrops beginning to fall from the darkened sky. August removed his duster and placed it around Willa's shoulders without comment, the gesture so natural she didn't think to refuse. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the vast landscape of rolling hills and valleys that had been Harper land since before Montana was a territory. This land was her legacy, her responsibility, and her home. She couldn't lose it, not to Richard Carson, not to the bank, not to the harsh realities of ranching life. And perhaps, just perhaps, August Blackwood might be the ally she needed in this fight. The spring roundup began a week later, with the first pale light of dawn streaking across the eastern sky. Willa stood on the porch of the main house, watching as August organized the remaining ranch hands, just 4 men where once there had been 12. Their task was daunting: gather scattered cattle from the far reaches of Harper land, brand the new calves, and prepare the herd for the summer grazing. "We'll start with the north pasture," August was saying, his authoritative tone drawing respectful nods from men twice his age. "Wyatt, take the eastern ridge. Cody, you and Hank work the lower valley. Jackson, you're with me on the western slopes." Willa approached, dressed in practical riding clothes, her father's old shirt tucked into sturdy trousers, a decision that had scandalized the town but served her well on horseback. "And where am I in this plan?" she asked, adjusting her hat against the rising sun. The men exchanged uncomfortable glances, but August met her gaze directly. "I assumed you'd be managing things from here. The books, supplies, planning, I can ride as well as any man on this ranch," Willa interrupted, her chin lifting in defiance. "I'll take the south pasture myself." "Miss Harper, Willa," August corrected himself, lowering his voice as he stepped closer. "The south pasture borders Carson land. It's not safe." "All the more reason I should go," she insisted. "Those are my cattle, my land. I won't hide in the house while others do the work my father raised me to do." August studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. "Take Jackson with you at least. We'll work in pairs, safer that way." It was a compromise Willa could accept. "Fine. Jackson and I will head south. We'll meet back here at sundown to compare counts." As the men mounted up, August lingered, watching as Willa checked her saddle and the rifle secured in its scabbard. "You're full of surprises, Willa Harper," he remarked. "You have no idea," she replied with a small smile, swinging into the saddle with practiced ease. Her horse, a spirited bay mare named Penny, pranced eagerly beneath her. The day stretched long and arduous, the work of rounding up cattle physically demanding in ways that tested even Willa's determination. By mid-afternoon, she and Jackson had located nearly 20 head, including several young calves that needed branding. The sun beat down mercilessly as they drove the small group toward the designated gathering point. "We should water the horses at the creek before heading back," Jackson suggested, wiping sweat from his weathered brow. At 50, he was the oldest hand remaining at the Harper Ranch, loyal to her father for decades. Willa nodded in agreement, guiding Penny toward the narrow creek that marked the boundary between Harper and Carson land. As they approached, the unmistakable sound of gunfire cracked through the air. "Get down!" Jackson yelled, reaching for his rifle. Willa reacted instantly, sliding from her saddle and taking cover behind a large boulder. 3 riders emerged from the tree line on the opposite bank, Carson men, by the look of their horses and gear. "Well, look what we found," called the lead rider, a burly man Willa recognized as Tom Hadley, Carson's foreman. The Harper girl herself playing Cowboy. "You're on Harper land, Hadley," she shouted back, her hand steady on her revolver. "Turn around and ride back where you came from." Hadley's laugh was cold. "Funny thing about land, it belongs to whoever can hold it, and from what I hear, you won't be holding this place much longer." "That's not for you to decide," Willa replied, fighting to keep her voice calm despite the fear curling in her stomach. "Mr. Carson made you a fair offer," Hadley continued, his horse stepping into the shallow creek. "He's not a patient man, Miss Harper. Accidents happen to stubborn people in these parts." Jackson raised his rifle. "That sounds mighty like a threat." "Just stating facts," Hadley replied with a shrug. "Like the fact that we found some Harper cattle mixed in with ours yesterday, had to drive them back." "Liar," Willa hissed. "You've been rustling our stock for months," Hadley's expression hardened. "Careful with those accusations, girl. Without a man to protect you, things could get mighty unpleasant around here." Before Willa could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. August appeared on the ridge above them, rifle at the ready, with Wyatt and Cody flanking him. "Is there a problem here?" August called, his voice deceptively calm as he guided his horse down the slope. Hadley assessed the changed odds, his confidence visibly wavering. "No problem. Just having a friendly chat with Miss Harper about property lines." "Then you won't mind continuing that chat in town with the sheriff present," August suggested, moving his horse protectively between Willa and the Carson men. That won't be necessary, Hadley replied, gesturing for his companions to back up. We were just leaving. He fixed his gaze on Willa one last time. Think about Mr. Carson's offer, Miss Harper. It's the best one you're going to get. As the Carson men retreated, Willa released the breath she'd been holding, her hand trembling slightly as she holstered her revolver. Are you all right? August asked, dismounting to stand beside her. I'm fine, she insisted, though the confrontation had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. We need to finish gathering the cattle before dark. August's expression was troubled. Hadley's threats are getting bolder. Carson's pushing harder than I expected. It's nothing new, Willa said, brushing dust from her clothes. He's been trying to intimidate me into selling since my father died. But why? August asked, looking around at the land. Your ranch is struggling, yes, but Carson has 3 times the land already. Why is he so determined to have yours specifically? Willa hesitated, then decided August had earned some truth. There's a survey report in my father's desk. The territorial government is planning a railroad spur through this valley within 2 years. The proposed route cuts right through the south pasture. Understanding dawned in August's eyes, and Carson knows this. Somehow, yes, the value of this land will triple once the railroad comes through. He wants to buy cheap now and profit later. Willa mounted Penny again, determination setting her jaw. But this ranch is all I have left of my family. I won't sell, not to Carson, not to anyone. August nodded, swinging back into his own saddle. Then we'd better make sure you don't have to. As they rode back toward the gathered cattle, Willa found herself studying August's profile, wondering not for the first time about the man behind the reputation. In just a week, he had transformed the operation of the ranch, working from dawn until well past dusk, his knowledge and skills proving invaluable. The other hands respected him instinctively, following his lead without question. Yet there remained an air of mystery about him, a sense that August Blackwood was revealing only what he wanted others to see. When he thought no one was watching, his expression would sometimes shift, a shadow of something like regret passing over his features before the confident exterior returned. Whatever his secrets, Willa was beginning to trust him perhaps more than was wise for a woman in her position. But with enemies like Richard Carson circling, she needed allies, and August Blackwood was proving to be the most capable ally she could have hoped for. That evening, as the ranch hands gathered in the bunkhouse after a long day's work, Willa invited August to join her for supper in the main house, a decision that raised eyebrows among the men, but one she defended as necessary to discuss ranch business. Mrs. Abernathy, the elderly woman who had helped raise Willa after her mother's death and now served as the ranch's cook and housekeeper, set out a simple but hearty meal of beef stew, cornbread, and apple pie. You're working these men too hard, the older woman chided as she poured coffee. Especially yourself, Miss Willa. Your father would want you to take better care. My father would want me to save this ranch, Willa replied gently, and I can't do that without putting in the work, Mrs. Abernathy cast a speculative glance between Willa and August before leaving them to their meal with a knowing smile that made Willa flush with embarrassment. She's protective of you, August observed, breaking off a piece of cornbread. She's been like a mother to me since I was 8 years old, Willa explained. Sometimes I think she forgets I'm a grown woman now. Family doesn't have to be blood, August remarked, a distant look crossing his face. Sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the one we're born into. Is that experience talking? Willa asked, curious about his past. Do you have family somewhere? August was quiet for a moment, stirring his stew thoughtfully. Not anymore, lost my parents young, had a brother once died at Shiloh. I'm sorry, Willa said softly, the war took so many. That it did. August's voice was low, tinged with an old grief. After Thomas died, I wandered, tried being a lawman for a while in Kansas. That didn't end well. Willa sensed there was much more to that story but didn't press. And now you're here, helping a stubborn woman save a struggling ranch. A smile tugged at the corner of August's mouth. Seems like a worthy enough cause. Even if it means facing down Richard Carson, Willa asked, serious now. He's powerful, August. He owns half the county and has the territorial governor's ear. Men who cross him tend to disappear or meet with unfortunate accidents. I've faced worse men than Richard Carson, August replied, his eyes hardening momentarily. But we need to be smart about this. Your father's survey report that's evidence of why Carson wants your land so badly. We should take it to Sheriff Morgan in town. Willa shook her head. Morgan's in Carson's pocket, has been for years. Then we need a different approach, August said, leaning forward. The roundup showed we have about 70 head total, including the new calves. Not enough to cover your banknote, I'm guessing. Not even close, Willa admitted. We need at least twice that. August nodded thoughtfully. There's a cattle auction in Helena next month. Prices are higher there than selling locally. If we can increase the herd size before then and get the cattle to Helena safely. How would we increase the herd in a month? Willa asked, skeptical. I've heard rumors of wild cattle in the North Hills, August explained. Survivors from failed ranches, strays that joined up. Nobody's claimed them. If we could round up even 20 or 30 head. That's rustling, Willa pointed out. Not if they're truly unclaimed, August countered. It's frontier law, unbranded cattle on open range are fair game. Willa considered this, turning the idea over in her mind. It was risky, potentially dangerous, but if successful, it could provide the breathing room she desperately needed. And if Carson's men try to stop us? She asked. August's expression grew serious. That's why we move carefully. Small groups, night work, different routes than expected. We make ourselves a harder target. The plan took shape as they talked into the evening, the practical details of survival pushing aside the awareness of how easily they had fallen into partnership. When August finally rose to leave, the night well advanced, Willa walked him to the door. Thank you, she said simply, for everything you're doing. August paused on the porch, the moonlight silvering his features. Your father believed in this place, so do you. That makes it worth fighting for. An unexpected impulse seized Willa, and before she could reconsider, she rose on tiptoe to place a quick kiss on his cheek. Good night, August. His eyes widened slightly in surprise, but he recovered quickly, tipping his hat with a small smile. Good night, Willa. As she watched him walk toward the bunkhouse, Willa pressed a hand to her chest, unsettled by the rapid beating of her heart. August Blackwood was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his skill with a gun, and everything to do with how he made her feel when he looked at her with those clear blue eyes. For the first time since her father's death, Willa allowed herself to feel something like hope, not just for the ranch, but perhaps for herself as well. The following weeks unfolded in a flurry of activity as August's plan was put into motion. Small groups of riders ventured into the northern hills, returning with small numbers of unbranded cattle, 5 here. 7 there, gradually increasing the Harper herd without drawing undue attention. Willa worked alongside the men, her riding and roping skills improving daily under August's patient guidance. The nights were spent poring over ledgers, calculating costs and potential profits, planning their route to Helena for the auction. It was during one such evening, nearly 3 weeks after August had first offered his shooting lesson, that Willa realized how much had changed. The ranch was still in danger, Carson still a threat, but a sense of purpose had returned to the place, a fighting spirit that had been missing since her father's decline. And at the center of that change was August, whose presence seemed to fill every corner of her life now. He was the first person she looked for each morning, the last voice she heard each night as they discussed the day's progress. His quiet strength had become something she depended on, his rare smiles a reward she found herself working to earn. You're staring, August remarked without looking up from the map he was studying at her father's desk. Willa blinked, embarrassed at being caught. I was just thinking. About, He raised his eyes to meet hers, a question in their depths. "About how different things are since you arrived," she admitted. "We might actually save this place." August set down his pencil, his expression turning serious. "We're not out of danger yet. The herd's up to 92 head now, but Carson's men have been watching our movements. They know something's happening." "Let them watch," Willa said with more confidence than she felt. "We'll be ready to move the cattle to Helena in 10 days. Once we make the sale, Carson won't let us get that far without trying something," August interrupted. "We need to be prepared." Willa sighed, knowing he was right. "What do you suggest?" "A different route than expected. And we spread a false story in town, let Carson think we're moving the herd east to Miles City instead of north to Helena." "Deception," Willa mused. "My father always said a straight path was best." "Your father wasn't facing an enemy who fights dirty," August pointed out gently. "Sometimes you have to adapt to survive." "Is that what you've done?" Willa asked, seizing the opportunity to learn more about him. "Adapted to survive." August was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the lines of the map absently. "I've made choices I'm not proud of," he finally said. "Done things that haunt me still, but yes, I survived." "What happened in Kansas?" The question had been on Willa's mind since he'd mentioned his time as a lawman. August's expression closed off momentarily before he seemed to come to a decision. "I was a deputy in a small town called Willow Creek. The local cattle baron, Ezekiel Ward, operated much like your Richard Carson intimidation, violence, buying officials. When he had a rival rancher murdered, I gathered evidence against him." He paused, a muscle working in his jaw. "The night before the territorial judge was due to arrive, Ward's men attacked the jail. Killed the sheriff and a witness we were protecting. I managed to kill 3 of them before they shot me and left me for dead." Willa's breath caught. "But you survived." "Barely," August confirmed. "A doctor passing through saved my life. By the time I recovered, Ward had convinced everyone I was corrupt, that I'd been in league with the murdered rancher to steal Ward's cattle. There was a price on my head in Kansas after that." "That's why you drift," Willa realized. "You're still running." "I was," August corrected. "But a man gets tired of running eventually." The implication of his words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. "Well," Willa said finally, breaking the tension, "I'm glad your wandering brought you here." August's expression softened. "So am I." Before either could say more, the sound of approaching horses shattered the quiet evening. August was on his feet instantly, reaching for his gun belt as he moved to the window. 3 riders, he reported, his voice tense. "Coming fast." Willa joined him, peering into the gathering darkness. As the riders came into view, she recognized Jackson on the lead horse, his usually calm demeanor replaced by urgent haste. "Something's wrong," she said, already moving toward the door. They reached the porch just as Jackson and the other 2 hands pulled up, their horses lathered and breathing hard from hard riding. "Carson's men," Jackson called out, dismounting quickly. "They've cut the fence lines on the north pasture, drove off at least 20 head before we spotted them." "Anyone hurt?" August asked sharply. "Hank took a bullet in the arm," Jackson replied, gesturing to the youngest hand who was clutching his bloody sleeve. "Nothing serious, but they weren't shy about shooting." "Get him inside," Willa instructed. "Mrs. Abernathy can tend to him." "How many men, Jackson?" 6 that we saw," the older man answered. "Hadley was leading them. They're driving the cattle toward Carson land as we speak." August's expression hardened. "We're going after them." "It's dark," Willa pointed out, "and they'll be expecting pursuit. Which is why we need to move now while we still have a chance of catching them," August insisted. "Those 20 head could make the difference between meeting your bank note or not." Willa knew he was right. They couldn't afford to lose a single cow, let alone 20. "I'm coming with you." "Willa," August began. "Don't argue," she cut him off. "This is my ranch, my cattle, I'm coming." After a moment of tense silence, August nodded. "Saddle fresh horses," he instructed the men. "Bring rifles and extra ammunition. We ride in 10 minutes." As the men hurried to comply, August turned to Willa. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. "Carson's men won't hesitate to shoot a woman if it serves their purpose." "I know," Willa replied, checking her revolver, "but they'll find I'm not as easy a target as they might expect." A ghost of a smile touched August's lips. "No, I don't imagine you are." Within minutes, they were riding hard toward the north pasture, following the trail of the stolen cattle. The night was clear, a three-quarter moon providing enough light to track by. August led the way, his eyes scanning the ground with impressive skill. "They're heading for Serpent Canyon," he announced after nearly an hour of pursuit. "Smart move, narrow passage, easy to defend." "There's a side trail," Willa informed him. "An old hunting path my father showed me years ago. It connects to the main canyon about a mile in." August considered this. "If we split up, half of us continue the direct pursuit, half take your side trail, we could catch them in a pincer." The strategy was sound but dangerous. After a brief discussion, they decided August would lead Willa and Cody on the side trail, while Jackson and Wyatt continued the main pursuit, creating a distraction. The hunting trail was steep and treacherous in the dark, forcing them to move slowly despite the urgency of their mission. Willa led the way, her knowledge of the terrain proving invaluable as they picked their way through dense undergrowth and rocky passages. "Hold up," August whispered as they neared the junction with the main canyon. "Listen." In the distance, they could hear the lowing of cattle and the sounds of men's voices. Carefully, they dismounted and secured their horses, continuing on foot until they reached a ridge overlooking the canyon floor. Below them, Carson's men had stopped to rest, confident in their escape. The stolen cattle were gathered in a natural corral formed by the canyon walls, while the rustlers had built a small fire and were passing a bottle between them. 6 men, August confirmed in a whisper. "All armed, Jackson and Wyatt should be approaching from the other end soon." "What's the plan?" Cody asked, nervously checking his rifle. "When we hear Jackson's signal, we create a crossfire," August explained. "Aim high at first, we want to scatter them, not start a bloodbath if we can avoid it." Willa nodded in agreement, though her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. These men had stolen from her, threatened her people. She wanted justice, not vengeance. They didn't have long to wait. Within minutes, a distinctive owl call echoed through the canyon, Jackson's signal that they were in position. "Now," August ordered, raising his rifle and firing into the air above the rustlers' camp. Chaos erupted below as the surprised men scrambled for cover, reaching for weapons. From the opposite end of the canyon, Jackson and Wyatt opened fire as well, creating the impression of a larger force. "This is Harper land," August shouted down. "Drop your weapons and step away from the cattle," Hadley's voice bellowed back. "This ain't Harper land, it's open range. Those cattle were unbranded." "That's a lie," Willa called out, unable to contain her anger. "I can see our brand from here." A bullet whistled past her head in response, forcing her to duck behind a boulder. August returned fire with precise aim, hitting the ground near one of the rustlers who had taken position behind a fallen log. "Next one won't miss," August warned. "Surrender now, and we'll let the sheriff sort this out." "Sheriff Morgan works for Mr. Carson," Hadley shouted back with a laugh. "You think we're afraid of him?" "Then perhaps you should be afraid of me," August replied, his voice taking on a dangerous edge that Willa hadn't heard before. "Some of you might recognize my name, August Blackwood. I earned my reputation honestly, and I don't miss twice." A murmur ran through the rustlers at the name, and Willa could see several of them exchanging worried glances. August's reputation was evidently known even here. "We've got you surrounded," August continued, pressing the advantage. "Your choice is simple: walk away now, leave the cattle and live to see morning, or push this further and see how many of you I can put in the ground before sunrise." The tense standoff stretched for several long moments. Finally, Hadley called out, "Fine, take your damn cattle, but this isn't over, Blackwood. Carson won't forget this." "Neither will I," August replied coldly. "Now mount up and ride out slowly." Under the watchful eyes and ready rifles of the Harper contingent, Carson's men reluctantly abandoned their camp, mounting their horses and riding out of the canyon. August kept his rifle trained on them until they disappeared from sight. "Jackson," he called once they were gone. "Check the cattle, make sure they are all accounted for." As Jackson and Wyatt moved to gather the herd, Willa turned to August, studying his face in the moonlight. "You scared them with just your name." August lowered his rifle, his expression troubled. "A reputation can be useful. It can also be a burden." "Is that why you've been hiding who you really are?" Willa asked softly. "I've heard stories about August Blackwood the gunfighter. I never connected them to you." "I've been trying to leave that part of me behind," he admitted. "Your father knew it's why he hired me, actually. He thought the ranch needed protection, and he was right." Willa touched his arm gently. "Thank you for using that reputation to help us tonight." August covered her hand with his own, the touch sending warmth through her despite the cool night air. "I told you before, this place is worth fighting for." What remained unspoken between them was the growing awareness that it wasn't just the ranch he was fighting for anymore. As they drove the recovered cattle back toward Harper Land, Willa rode beside August, their conversation turning to practical matters, reinforcing security, preparing for Carson's inevitable retaliation. But beneath the practical discussion ran a current of something deeper, a connection neither could deny any longer. By the time they reached the ranch, dawn was breaking over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The hands took the cattle to the secure pasture while Willa and August dismounted near the main house, both exhausted but satisfied with the night's success. "You should get some rest," August suggested as they walked toward the porch. "It's been a long night." "So should you," Willa replied, pausing at the bottom of the steps. "August?" He turned to face her, his expression softening as he looked down at her. "Yes." Words failed her suddenly, the emotions of the night, fear, triumph, and something else entirely overwhelming her ability to express them. Instead, she moved forward impulsively, rising on tiptoe to press her lips against his. For a heartbeat, August remained still, surprise evident in his tension. Then his arms came around her, drawing her closer as he returned the kiss with unexpected gentleness, his hand cradling the back of her head as though she were something precious and fragile. When they finally broke apart, Willa's cheeks were flushed, her heart racing. "I shouldn't have done that," she whispered, though she felt no real regret. "No," August agreed, his voice rough. "You shouldn't have." But his eyes told a different story, filled with warmth and desire that mirrored her own feelings. "What happens now?" Willa asked, suddenly uncertain. August sighed, reluctantly releasing her. "Now we prepare for Carson's next move. He won't take tonight's defeat lightly." "That's not what I meant," Willa said softly. "I know," August replied, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "But Carson has to come first. Once your ranch is secure, once you're safe." He left the sentence unfinished, but the promise in his eyes was clear. There would be time for them after the danger had passed. "Get some rest," he repeated, stepping back with visible effort. "Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." As Willa watched him walk toward the bunkhouse, confusion warred with the lingering warmth of his kiss. August Blackwood was becoming far more important to her than she had ever intended, and that realization was both thrilling and terrifying. August's prediction proved accurate. The following day brought word from town that Richard Carson was in a towering rage, making public threats against both the Harper Ranch and August himself. Sheriff Morgan had been seen riding out to the Carson property early that morning, presumably to discuss the previous night's events from Carson's perspective. "We need to accelerate our plans," August advised as they gathered in the main house that evening. "Move the herd to Helena sooner than planned." "We're not ready," Jackson protested. "The cattle need another week of grazing to be in prime condition for the auction." "Better to sell them for slightly less than lose them entirely," August countered. "Carson's next move will be bigger, more direct. He's been humiliated, and men like him don't tolerate humiliation." Willa considered their options, weighing the risks against their dwindling time. The banknote was due in less than 6 weeks, and they needed every dollar they could get. 2 more days, she decided finally. We fatten them for 2 more days on the south pasture grasses, then we move north. That gives us time to prepare properly. August nodded, accepting her decision, though concern lingered in his eyes. We'll need to set watches around the clock. No one rides alone, no matter what. The next 2 days passed in tense preparation. Supplies were gathered, routes planned, and contingencies discussed. Through it all, Willa and August maintained a careful distance from each other, their brief moment of intimacy set aside in favor of the urgent task before them. But Willa caught him watching her sometimes, his gaze thoughtful and warm, and knew that what had begun between them was merely postponed, not forgotten. On the morning they were to begin the drive to Helena, Willa woke before dawn, a sense of anticipation mingling with apprehension. This cattle drive represented her last, best hope of saving her family's legacy. Success would mean security, a chance to rebuild. Failure would mean losing everything: the land, the house, her independence. As she dressed in her riding clothes, a soft knock sounded at her bedroom door. Miss Willa. Mrs. Abernathy called. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." Frowning, Willa finished buttoning her shirt and went downstairs to find Sheriff Morgan waiting in the parlor, his weathered face grave beneath his gray mustache. "Morning, Miss Harper," he greeted her, turning his hat in his hands. "Sorry to disturb you so early." "What can I do for you, Sheriff?" Willa asked coolly, well aware of the man's loyalty to Carson. "I'm here on official business," Morgan replied, straightening slightly. "There's been a complaint filed against one of your hands, August Blackwood. I'm here to place him under arrest." Willa's heart stuttered in her chest. "On what charges?" Cattle rustling, Morgan stated. "Mr. Carson has signed a sworn statement that Blackwood and others from your ranch stole 20 head of Carson cattle 2 nights ago." "That's a lie," Willa snapped. "Those were Harper cattle that Carson's men stole from us. We merely recovered what was ours." Morgan shrugged, unmoved. "That's for the judge to decide. In the meantime, I need to take Blackwood into custody." "And if I refuse to cooperate?" Willa challenged. "Then I'd have to arrest you as an accomplice," Morgan said, though he looked uncomfortable at the prospect. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Miss Harper. Carson's determined to press charges." "Of course he is," Willa said bitterly. "The timing is remarkably convenient, isn't it? Just as we're preparing to drive our herd to market." Morgan had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "I'm just doing my job." "No, you're doing Carson's bidding," Willa corrected, anger rising within her. "And we both know it." Before Morgan could respond, the front door opened and August entered, taking in the scene with one swift glance. "Problem?" he asked mildly, though his hand hovered near his holstered revolver. "Sheriff Morgan is here to arrest you for cattle rustling," Willa informed him, her voice tight with fury. "Carson's filed charges." August nodded as though this news was expected. "I see." "And if I go peacefully, what happens to Miss Harper and the ranch?" Morgan shifted uncomfortably. "The charges are against you specifically, Blackwood, though there might be questions for the others involved in the recovery operation." "Recovery operation," August repeated with a humorless smile. "At least you acknowledge that much." He turned to Willa. "You need to get the herd to Helena. I'll deal with this." "August, no," Willa protested. "We both know this is just Carson's way of stopping our drive." "If you're in jail, if I resist arrest, things will only get worse," August interrupted gently. "Trust me on this. Take Jackson and the others, get the cattle to market. I'll handle Carson and his false charges." The look they exchanged contained volumes: concern, determination, and the unspoken feelings that had been growing between them. Finally, Willa nodded reluctantly. "Sheriff," August said, turning to Morgan and holding out his wrists, "I'm ready to go." Morgan seemed relieved at the peaceful surrender, quickly securing August's hands with iron cuffs. "We'll head to town now. The circuit judge arrives tomorrow to hear the case." "One moment," Willa said, stepping forward. To Morgan's evident discomfort and August's surprise, she reached up and kissed August firmly on the lips. "This isn't over," she whispered as she pulled away. "Not by a long shot," August agreed softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Be careful, Willa, Carson's desperate now." As Morgan led August outside to where his horse waited, Willa followed, her mind racing. This was clearly Carson's attempt to derail their cattle drive, removing the most capable defender of the ranch at the critical moment. Without August, they would be more vulnerable, easier targets. But Carson had underestimated her determination and the loyalty of the remaining hands who had witnessed August's leadership over the past weeks. "We proceed as planned," she announced as the men gathered for breakfast shortly after Morgan and August departed. "The cattle drive to Helena starts in 2 hours. Without Blackwood?" Wyatt asked, concern evident in his young face. "We don't have a choice," Willa replied firmly. "The bank note is due in 5 weeks. Without the proceeds from this sale, we lose everything." "What about Carson?" Jackson asked. "He'll know we're vulnerable without August." "That's counting on him thinking I can't lead this drive myself," Willa pointed out, her chin lifting. "He's wrong." The men exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. One by one, they pledged their support, their loyalty to the Harper name and to Willa herself, overriding their concerns about the dangers ahead. By mid-morning, they were moving the herd northward, the nearly 100 head of cattle forming a dusty procession across the rolling Montana landscape. Willa rode at the front alongside Jackson, her father's old rifle across her saddle, determination set in every line of her body. Behind her, Wyatt, Cody, and Hank, his arm still bandaged but healing well, managed the flanks of the herd, keeping the cattle moving at a steady pace. They had planned for a 4-day journey to Helena. Following the route, August had mapped out one that would keep them away from Carson land as much as possible. The first day passed without incident, the cattle moving well, the weather cooperating with clear skies and moderate temperatures. They made camp that night in a protected valley, setting watches in pairs as August had insisted upon. It was during Willa's watch, in the darkest hours before dawn, that she heard the approaching riders. She quickly woke Jackson, who was sharing her shift, and they roused the others with quiet urgency. "At least 4 riders," she whispered as they gathered behind the cover of a large boulder. "Coming from the east, Carson's men?" Cody asked, checking his rifle. "Most likely," Jackson confirmed grimly. "They must have been watching us leave the ranch." Willa made a quick decision. "Wyatt, stay with the herd. The rest of us will spread out and create a perimeter. If they're just scouting, we let them pass. If they make a move toward the cattle, we defend our property." The men nodded, moving to their positions with practiced efficiency. Willa took cover behind a fallen log, her rifle ready as she watched the approaching figures emerge from the pre-dawn shadows. 4 riders, as she had estimated, moving slowly and carefully toward their camp. Even in the dim light, she recognized Tom Hadley's bulky silhouette at the lead. The riders stopped at the edge of their camp, studying the seemingly sleeping forms around the banked fire bedrolls stuffed with saddle blankets to create the illusion of slumbering ranch hands. "Spread out," Hadley instructed his companions quietly. "Find the Harper woman first. Carson wants her unharmed." Willa's blood ran cold at the implications of that order. What did Carson intend for her? As the riders dismounted and began to move toward the fake sleepers, Willa gave a sharp whistle, the signal to engage. Immediately, rifle fire erupted from multiple positions, sending Carson's men diving for cover. "This is Harper property," Willa called out. "Leave now or face the consequences." "There's nowhere to run, Harper," Hadley shouted back. "Carson owns the law in these parts. Your gunfighter is in jail and you're outnumbered." "Count again," Jackson replied from his position, firing a warning shot that kicked up dirt near Hadley's boot. A tense exchange of gunfire followed, neither side willing to fully commit to the fight. Finally, after one of his men took a bullet to the leg, Hadley called for retreat. "This isn't over, Harper," he yelled as they mounted up. "Carson will have your land one way or another." Willa waited until they had ridden well away before emerging from cover, her hands shaking slightly from the confrontation. "Everyone all right?" The men nodded, relieved but wary. "They'll be back," Jackson warned, "and with more men next time." "Then we need to move faster," Willa decided. "Break camp now. We'll push the herd harder, try to reach Helena in 3 days instead of 4. The grueling pace took its toll on both cattle and humans alike. They drove the herd from dawn until dusk, stopping only when absolutely necessary, making cold camps at night to avoid revealing their position with firelight. Carson's men shadowed them but kept their distance after that first confrontation, seemingly content to follow and wait for a more opportune moment to strike. By the 3rd day, exhaustion had settled into Willa's bones, her determination alone keeping her in the saddle as they approached the outskirts of Helena. The cattle were tired but healthy, their value evident in their solid condition despite the forced march. "We made it," Cody said with disbelief as the buildings of Helena came into view in the distance. "I didn't think we would, but we did it." "Not quite yet," Willa cautioned, scanning the horizon nervously. Carson's men had disappeared from view earlier that morning, a development that worried rather than reassured her. "Stay alert. They could still try something before we reach the auction yards." Her instincts proved correct. As they approached the final stretch of road leading into Helena, a group of riders appeared ahead, blocking their path. Richard Carson himself sat at their center, his expensive Eastern suit incongruous against the rugged Montana landscape. "Miss Harper," he called as they drew closer, his voice carrying easily in the still afternoon air. "I think it's time we had a conversation." Willa signaled for the herd to halt, then rode forward with Jackson flanking her protectively. "We have nothing to discuss, Mr. Carson. You've stolen my cattle, threatened my people, and had an innocent man arrested on false charges." Carson's thin lips curved in what might have been intended as a smile but looked more like a predator's grimace. "Business, my dear, simply business. You've proven more resilient than anticipated." "Take that as a compliment and get out of our way," Willa replied coldly. "These cattle are going to auction." "I'm afraid I can't allow that," Carson said, his pretense at civility slipping. "You see, I've invested too much time and effort into acquiring your property to let it slip away now." "The railroad," Willa stated flatly. "That's what this has always been about." Carson's eyebrows rose slightly. "You know about that, do you, clever girl? Yes, the Helena spur line will make that worthless ranch of yours worth a small fortune. I offered to buy you out fairly." "Fair." Willa laughed bitterly. "Your offer wasn't even half the true value, even without the railroad consideration." "More than you'll get when the bank forecloses," Carson pointed out, "which it will unless these cattle reach auction. A shame they won't." "You can't stop us," Willa declared, though her heart pounded at the clear threat. Carson had 8 men with him, all armed and looking eager for confrontation. "Can't I?" Carson smiled coldly. "Your hired gun is awaiting trial in my pocket judge's courtroom." "You have 4 exhausted ranch hands against my 8. The math isn't difficult, Miss Harper." Before Willa could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. A group of riders appeared from the direction of Helena, moving quickly toward them. As they drew closer, Willa's heart leaped at the sight of a familiar figure in the lead, August Blackwood, free and armed, leading what appeared to be a posse of lawmen. "What is this?" Carson demanded, his confidence faltering. August reined in beside Willa, his presence like a shield between her and Carson. "Federal marshals, Mr. Carson," he explained with grim satisfaction. "It seems the territorial governor takes a dim view of wealthy landowners attempting to manipulate railroad routes for personal gain." A distinguished-looking man in a marshal's coat rode forward. "Richard Carson, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted fraud, and witness intimidation. We have sworn testimony from Sheriff Morgan regarding your instructions to falsely arrest Mr. Blackwood here." Carson's face contorted with rage. Morgan wouldn't dare, he did, August interrupted. Once I explained that federal charges might include him as an accomplice, he became remarkably forthcoming about your various schemes. This is absurd, Carson spluttered, looking to his men for support. But faced with federal marshals, their loyalty wavered visibly. Your men have a choice, the marshal announced. Disperse peacefully now or join you in custody. There are additional charges regarding cattle rustling that we're investigating. One by one, Carson's men backed away, unwilling to risk federal prosecution for their employer's ambitions. Within minutes, Carson found himself alone, his empire of intimidation crumbling before his eyes. As the marshals took Carson into custody, Willa turned to August, questions tumbling over themselves. When did you? Later, he promised, his eyes drinking in the sight of her as though he'd feared never seeing her again. Get your cattle to auction first. I'll explain everything afterward. With Carson's threat neutralized, the final leg of their journey passed without incident. The cattle were delivered to the auction yards, where their healthy condition drew immediate interest from buyers. By the following afternoon, Willa stood in the auctioneer's office, staring in disbelief at the bank draft in her hands. The cattle had sold for well above their expected price, more than enough to pay off the banknote with money left over to begin rebuilding the herd. Congratulations, August said softly from behind her. Your father would be proud. Willa turned to face him, emotions overwhelming her as the reality of their success sank in. You saved us, she whispered. How did you manage it? August led her outside, where they could speak privately away from the bustle of the auction yard. When Morgan arrested me, I recognized an opportunity. The circuit judge arriving wasn't Carson's pocket judge as expected, it was Judge Hammond, who has a reputation for integrity. So you told him about Carson's manipulation of the railroad route, Willa guessed. And about the false charges, the intimidation, all of it, August confirmed. Hammond contacted the territorial governor who sent the marshals. It seems Carson had been bribing officials for years, and the governor was looking for an excuse to investigate him. And Sheriff Morgan turned on him, Willa marveled. Self-preservation, August explained with a slight smile. Morgan realized he was on the losing side and changed allegiances quickly enough. They walked together toward the hotel where they would stay before beginning the journey back to the ranch, their steps naturally falling into rhythm with each other. What happens now? Willa asked, echoing her question from days before. August stopped, turning to face her fully. That depends on you, he said quietly. Carson is finished, your ranch is safe, the banknote will be paid, you don't need my protection anymore. Is that all you think you've been to me? Willa asked, hurt creeping into her voice. Protection? No, August admitted, his eyes softening as he looked at her. But I need to be sure of what you want, Willa. I'm not the man most parents would choose for their daughter. Your past made you the man you are, Willa interrupted, stepping closer to him. The man who saved my ranch, who taught me to shoot, who believed in me when even I was losing faith. Willa, August began, uncertainty clear in his expression. I love you, she said simply, the words emerging with surprising ease. I don't care about your past, I care about our future. August stood frozen for a moment, as though her declaration had shocked him to his core. Then, with a groan that seemed torn from somewhere deep inside him, he pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, August rested his forehead against hers. I've been half in love with you since that first day, he confessed. When you stood there trying to shoot with terrible form but such determination in your eyes, Willa laughed softly. I thought you were the most arrogant man I'd ever met. And now, he asked, suddenly vulnerable. Now I think you're the only man I could ever love, she replied honestly. But August, I need to know if you're staying. I can't build a life with someone who's always looking toward the next horizon. August's hands framed her face gently. I told you before a man gets tired of running eventually. I found something worth stopping for, Willa, someone worth building a life with. Joy bloomed in Willa's chest, bright and warm. Does that mean what I think it means? It means, August said solemnly, that if you'll have me, I'd like to stay, not as your hired hand but as your partner in all things. Are you proposing, Mr. Blackwood? Willa asked, her eyes dancing with happiness. Inelegantly, perhaps, he acknowledged with a smile, but sincerely. Then my answer is yes, Willa replied without hesitation. Though you should know what you're getting into, a stubborn woman with a struggling ranch and grand ambitions. Sounds perfect to me, August murmured, drawing her close again. As they sealed their promise with another kiss, Willa felt the last of her doubts melt away. The challenges ahead, rebuilding the herd, expanding the ranch, preparing for the coming railroad, no longer seemed insurmountable. With August by her side, she could face whatever the future held. Later that evening, as they sat together on the hotel's veranda watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Willa turned to August with a sudden thought. "Why did you really stay?" she asked. "That first day when I was so unwelcoming." "You could have left, found work elsewhere." August considered her question, his expression thoughtful as he took her hand in his. "I stayed because your father asked me to," he said, "but I kept staying because of you. Your courage, your determination, you reminded me of who I wanted to be, not just who I'd been." "I was scared," Willa admitted. "Terrified, really, trying so hard to prove I could handle everything alone." "You could have," August assured her, "but you don't have to." Willa leaned against him, content in a way she hadn't been since before her father's illness. "When we get back to the ranch," she said, "I want to start planning for the future. With the railroad coming, we could expand, maybe breed horses as well as cattle." August smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Whatever you want, although perhaps we should plan a wedding first." "That too," Willa agreed, happiness bubbling up inside her, "though Mrs. Abernathy will insist on a proper ceremony. She's probably been planning it since the first time she saw us together." "Smart woman," August remarked. "She saw what we were too stubborn to admit." As the last light of day faded into twilight, Willa reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From adversaries to allies to lovers, their path had been neither straight nor easy. But perhaps that made the destination all the sweeter. "What are you thinking?" August asked, noting her contemplative expression. Willa smiled, remembering a moment of doubt she'd experienced weeks before. "I once told you that I wasn't enough, not strong enough, not skilled enough to save the ranch. Do you remember what you said?" August nodded, his eyes warming with the memory. "I said you were more than enough for the ranch, more than enough for any challenge life might bring." His voice dropped to a tender whisper, "More than enough for forever." "I believe that now," Willa said softly, "about both of us." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, August and Willa remained on the veranda, planning their future together, a future that had seemed impossible just weeks before. The challenges ahead were real, but no longer daunting. Together, they were indeed more than enough. The journey back to the Harper Ranch was filled with a sense of triumph and anticipation. With Carson's threat removed and the bank note secured, Willa and August could focus on their plans for both the ranch and their life together. Word of their engagement spread quickly throughout the county, generally met with approval, though some expressed surprise that the independent Willa Harper would choose to marry at all, let alone a man with August's complicated reputation. "Let them talk," Willa said dismissively when August mentioned the gossip. "They'll find something new to discuss soon enough." The ranch itself seemed transformed upon their return, as though the cloud of uncertainty that had hung over it for so long had finally lifted. With careful management of the proceeds from the cattle sale, Willa was able to hire additional hands, begin repairs on the buildings, and even purchase new breeding stock to rebuild the herd. August proved to be as skilled at ranch management as he was at handling a gun. his years of drifting having taught him various techniques and practices that brought new efficiency to their operation. Together, they made a formidable team, each complementing the other's strengths. Mrs. Abernathy, as predicted, took charge of wedding preparations with enthusiasm bordering on obsession. "June," she declared firmly. "A proper June wedding with flowers and a real minister from Helena. Your father would have wanted it done right." Willa agreed, though she insisted on keeping the ceremony relatively small and simple. "Just our friends and neighbors," she stipulated. "No need for excessive fuss." As spring blossomed across the Montana landscape, the ranch flourished under their combined care. The new hands proved reliable, the cattle thrived, and initial surveys for the railroad spur confirmed that it would indeed pass through Harper land, increasing the property's value substantially. "We should consider building a proper station," August suggested one evening as they reviewed the railroad company's proposals. "Not just a whistle stop, but something that could serve as a shipping point for the whole valley." Willa nodded thoughtfully. "Harper Station," she mused. "It has a nice ring to it." "Blackwood Station might sound better," August teased, earning a playful swat from his fiancée. "Harper Blackwood, perhaps," Willa compromised with a smile. "A proper partnership." As their wedding day approached, Willa found herself reflecting on the extraordinary changes a year had brought. From the depths of grief and uncertainty following her father's death to the joy and security she now felt, the journey had been remarkable. The night before the ceremony, she visited her father's grave on a quiet hillside overlooking the ranch. The headstone was simple but dignified, much like the man it commemorated. "I think you knew what you were doing when you hired him, Papa," she said softly to the quiet evening air. "You always could see further ahead than most." A gentle breeze stirred the wildflowers she had placed on the grave, and Willa took it as a sign of her father's approval. With a sense of peace, she returned to the ranch house, ready to begin the next chapter of her life. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the June sky an unbroken expanse of Montana blue. The ranch had been transformed for the occasion, with wildflowers decorating the yard and a simple arch constructed near the old oak tree where Willa had played as a child. Guests began arriving mid-morning, neighboring ranchers, townsfolk from Elkhorn, even Judge Hammond, who had helped expose Carson's corruption. The mood was festive and warm, a celebration not just of a marriage but of a community coming together. In her bedroom, Willa prepared with Mrs. Abernathy's help, donning a simple but elegant gown of ivory silk that had been her mother's. Her chestnut hair was arranged in soft curls, adorned with a crown of wildflowers rather than a formal veil. "Your mother would be so proud, Mrs. Abernathy said, blinking back tears as she adjusted the gown's lace collar. "Both your parents would be." "I like to think they're watching somehow," Willa replied, her own eyes misting slightly, "that they know I've found happiness." "They know," the older woman assured her. "Some things the heart just knows." A knock at the door signaled it was time. Jackson, who had agreed to escort Willa in her father's absence, waited in the hallway, uncharacteristically dapper in his Sunday best. "You look beautiful, Miss Willa," he said gruffly, offering his arm with formal dignity. "Thank you, Jackson," she replied warmly, "for everything." Outside, the gathered guests turned as Willa appeared on the porch, a collective murmur of appreciation rising at the sight of the radiant bride. But Willa had eyes only for August, who waited beneath the oak tree, tall and handsome in a new black suit, his expression one of wonder and devotion as she approached. The minister from Helena, a kindly older man with a resonant voice, led them through the traditional ceremony with quiet dignity. When the time came for their vows, August took Willa's hands in his voice steady and sure. "Willa Harper, you saved me from a life of emptiness when you allowed me to stay," he began. "You showed me what it means to fight for something meaningful, to build rather than just survive. I promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings, to honor your strength and courage, and to love you with everything I am for as long as I live." Tears glistened in Willa's eyes as she responded. August Blackwood, you came into my life when I needed you most, though I was too stubborn to admit it. You taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, that partnership makes us stronger than we could ever be alone. I promise to walk this path with you, to face each challenge and celebrate each joy together, and to love you completely and faithfully all the days of my life. By the authority vested in me, the minister proclaimed after they had exchanged rings, simple gold bands that reflected the sunlight, I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. As August drew her into their first kiss as a married couple, cheers erupted from the assembled guests. Willa felt as though her heart might burst with happiness, the future stretching before them bright with promise. The celebration continued well into the evening, with dancing and feasting under lantern light as the summer sun slowly set behind the mountains. August proved to be an unexpectedly good dancer, guiding Willa through waltzes with the same grace he showed in everything he did. Happy, Mrs. Blackwood? He asked softly as they swayed together to a slow melody played by a local fiddler. Happier than I ever thought possible, Willa replied, resting her head against his chest. And it's Harper Blackwood, remember? We agreed. August chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her ear. So we did, a proper partnership in all things. As the celebration wound down and guests began to depart, offering final congratulations and well wishes, Willa and August stood together on the porch of what was now their home, watching the last wagons disappear down the long drive. What are you thinking? August asked, noticing her contemplative expression. I'm thinking about the day you arrived, Willa answered. How determined I was to prove I didn't need anyone's help, how scared I was of failing. And now, he prompted gently. Now I understand that needing others needing you doesn't make me weaker, it makes life richer. She turned to face him fully. I once told you I wasn't enough to save this place on my own. And I told you you were more than enough, August recalled, drawing her closer. You were right, Willa acknowledged. But so was I in a way. Some burdens aren't meant to be carried alone, some joys are sweeter when shared. August kissed her then, tender and passionate at once. I love you, Willa Harper Blackwood, he whispered against her lips. More than I have words to express. Show me, she replied softly, taking his hand and leading him inside toward their future together. In the years that followed, the Harper Blackwood Ranch prospered beyond even their ambitious plans. The railroad spur was completed, with Harper Station becoming a vital shipping point for the entire region. Their cattle operation expanded, supplemented by a successful horse breeding program that August developed using his extensive knowledge of horseflesh. They faced challenges of course harsh winters, market fluctuations, the occasional dispute with neighboring ranches. But together, they weathered each storm, their partnership only strengthening with time. 2 years after their wedding, Willa gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Alina, after August's mother. A son followed 3 years later, named Jeremiah in honor of Willa's father. The children grew up strong and capable, learning the ways of the ranch from both parents with equal measure. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they stood together on the porch watching the sunset, a tradition they had maintained through the years, August presented Willa with a small wooden box. What's this? She asked, opening it to reveal a delicate silver locket. Open it, August encouraged. Inside, she found a miniature photograph of the two of them on their wedding day, looking young and hopeful and deeply in love. On the opposite side was a more recent picture, their family of 4, taken just a month before. It's beautiful, Willa said, tears welling in her eyes as August fastened the chain around her neck. 10 years ago, you changed my life, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You gave me a home, a purpose, a family. Every day I thank whatever twist of fate brought me to your door. We saved each other, Willa corrected gently, and built something neither of us could have created alone. As twilight deepened around them, they remained on the porch, watching their children play in the yard with the boundless energy of youth. The ranch spread out before them, a testament to their shared vision and hard work, prosperous, secure, a legacy for generations to come. Do you ever miss it? Willa asked suddenly. The freedom of drifting, answering to no one, August considered her question seriously, as he did all things. No, he said finally. What I had before wasn't freedom, it was emptiness disguised as independence. True freedom is having something worth staying for, worth fighting for. He squeezed her hand gently. Worth loving. Willa leaned against him, content in the life they had built together. From unlikely beginnings, a struggling rancher's daughter and a drifting gunman with a troubled past, they had forged a partnership that transcended the conventional. Equal in all things, they had defied the expectations of their time and created their own definition of happiness. More than enough for forever, Willa murmured, echoing the words that had become a touchstone of their relationship. Always, August agreed, drawing her close as the first stars appeared in the Montana sky, bright promises in the vast darkness, much like the love they had found against all odds in the wild landscape of the West.